ladies and gentlemen, warm welcome for Dennis Bovell.
It's a real pleasure to be invited to come and chat to you, Dennis.
Pleasure to be here.
And we've sort of put together some questions to ask you.
Oh, no. Ask away, then.
So have you ever done anything musical in Walthamstow?
In my life?
Talking
No.
of Walthamstow.
Well, Walthamstow. Let me see. I've been down the dog track.
Okay.
Showing me age now, aren't I? Yeah, I think some long time ago, my band did do a gig in the stadium, where they used to have the dog racing. But not that any of you would have been old enough to have been there.
Which band was that?
Matumbi.
Matumbi. So you were born, as it goes, according to the records here, in Barbados.
Yes.
What was your first musical memory?
It had to have been gospel, because I lived with my grandparents. My parents had forsaken me and come over to London. And not that I minded, because I thought, I was better off without the pair of them.
Oh, dear.
Okay. Me nan and me granddad spoiled us rotten, right? And I quite enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And but me granddad was a priest. And he was of the Seventh-day Adventist persuasion. And he was the minister of our local church, which meant that he only wanted to hear gospel music in the house. We weren't allowed to have the Beatles or the Stones or Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder or anything like that. It was just, all religious music, which was quite good musically because, it was a bit more than two chords.
Yeah, it's a grounding, isn't it?
Yes. In fact, I'm very happy to have been through that because it taught me the difference of in tune and out of tune harmonies, etc.
I bet it did, and it might have contributed to your wonderful singing voice, I wonder.
Wow.
So, is that how you started playing music, through gospel music?
Yes. In fact, my mother's youngest brother, whose name is Samuel, and we used to make a joke out of him and go, Uncle Sam. And he broke away from the usual gospel thing because my mum's elder brothers had a quartet and they used to sing on the radio a cappella, and they were called the Walker Brothers. So when I came over here and I heard, they've nicked my uncle's name, Walker Brothers, nah. And they were quite famous in Barbados on programs like Stars on Sunday, the kind of religious programs on the radio on Sunday. They were all over it.
Wow.
And but the younger one was a bit of a rebel, and he went to play with a soca band, a calypso band.
Yeah.
And my granddad was not too happy about that. And then he bought a guitar, and it fascinated me. And he said, "Well, don't touch it." Because, I was
fatal.
I was the little nephew that he probably didn't want around, and his big sister's son and the first grandchild. So I was spoilt rotten. I could do whatever I wanted, but not touch that guitar. Until he went to school in the city and we lived in the country. So it took him about an hour to get to school. So I could gauge how long it was going to take him to get home from school and have a tinkle on the guitar and put it back before he got there. And I broke a string.
Oh, my gosh.
So I had to own up. And he said, all right, then. It's obvious that you're not going to keep your hands off this, but what I will do is I will teach you open tuning, which is the sound each string makes when you pluck it without touching anything else, just a string. It's open tuning. And I can still remember it now. It went dee-da-da-da-da-da. And I had to sing that to him. You go, open tuning. I go, da-da-da-da-da-da. All right, you can have 5 minutes on the guitar.
That is a brilliant way to start.
And then I learned how to play, Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when... And of course, I was up on the rostrum the next church day doing it, and I forgot it halfway through and started crying.
Oh, that's a great way into music.
Yeah, I was in from then, and then I got notification from London. Beep, 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 beep. We want our son with us. So who are these people? It's like, your mum and dad. I'm going, tell them to off. Right, I'm not going there. I hear it snows up there, and it's cold. And I love the beach, and I love the sun, and people pay big money to come here.
Yeah.
And go on holiday and that, and they go back after 2 weeks. Why am I going up there? I'll stay here. My nan went, well, there are your parents, so off you go. Put me on a plane. Here I was. Here I am ever since.
Okay, so how was that transition into London for you?
Well,
as a young boy coming from Barbados.
The food tasted different, and the houses looked like factories.
Yeah.
Because where we lived, the next door neighbour was, I don't know, at least 500 yards down the road. But when I came and saw that the next door neighbour was next door, and you could hear through the walls when the geezer was having a go at his missus, or vice versa, and there was a need to have earplugs because you could hear everything that was going on there, and next door, and there was someone on the left and someone on the right, and our house was in the middle, and it was like, not very private.
Yeah.
So I had to get used to that. Also, I was quite fond of walking around barefooted.
Yeah.
Which I couldn't do anymore once I got here, because it was like, well, you catch a cold if you do that, son.
You've got to wear shoes.
Got to wear shoes. So,
big change.
Those were the two major changes. And then learning to talk like this.
Which you did quite well, actually.
That was a big change and all. I was like, all right, son, where have you come from then? I come from Barbados, don't I?
Can we sort of move forward then to your first group?
Yes.
How did you form a? Did you form a group in London then?
There was a group already formed at my school, in the second year, and there was 3 kids that had a group, and they were looking for a 4th kid to join. And so I volunteered, and they were looking for a guitarist and a singer, and I, did the audition.
Practice that. You'd already done that.
And the thing was that I found out that I knew more chords than them, and they weren't really at the same standard as me, so I quickly became the leader of the band. So now you play this and you play that. And then we did it, and the group was called Roadworks Ahead. And we helped ourselves to lots of signs from the roadside that belonged to the local borough, to adorn the stage as we played at school assembly. The headmaster was pissed off. He was like, where did you get those from? We go, take them back immediately. So we looked stupid to take them back, because we nicked all the signs that said Roadworks Ahead, and adorned the stage. It was a great name. And then by the age of about 15, we went into a talent competition in Vauxhall, and we came 3rd, and we got more publicity than the people that came first, because we were all 15-year-olds in this, competition.
Big London-wide.
Yeah, London-wide. And there was a group called Out of the Blue that won, and we came 3rd, but we got quite a lot of press about it, and I think in South London Press and the ones of Borough News, that these 15-year-olds had actually been placed in that.
Very good. And were your mum and dad on with that, or?
I didn't tell them.
They didn't see it in the paper, either?
No, because I weren't allowed to be out playing guitar. In fact, we once went down to Sutton to do a gig, and after the gig, the guy who was driving the van worked for the gas board, so he had to, he had his little van, and then he said, if you're not here in 5 minutes, I'm going. And he went. And we had to walk from Sutton back to Wandsworth. And I got in at 4 in the morning, and my dad gave us a hiding because I'd lied that I was going to go to the school for the evening to do something very important at the school, because that was the only way I would be let out of the house. Like, oh, there's this thing at school, I've got to go, I've got to be there. And then get left in Sutton and then walk back and get home at 4 in the morning, and I've still got the scars.
So you were already starting to be like leader of the band at such an early age.
Yeah, because I knew my way around the guitar a little bit better than the other kids who we were all 12 years old, and we progressed from there, and we were doing like cover versions of Simple Simon Says. There was a group called the 1910 Fruit Gum Company, and none of you lot are old enough to even know who they were. Are you? See, nobody knows. It goes, put your hands in the air. Simple Simon.
Oh, I know that one. Yeah, I do remember.
The 1910 Fruit Gum Company. Check it out, right?
So, how did the band keep going?
No, because at the age of just over 15, one of the fellas of the band left school and got a job working for Robert Stigwood. And Robert Stigwood was the man who managed the Bee Gees. And the Bee Gees had Bee Gees had two lives, right? The first time they came out and were very popular, and then they were dormant for a bit, and then they came back again. Well, this is on the first outing of the Bee Gees. My friend Norman got a job working for Stigwood's, the publisher. So he was like, mate, I'm in there.
He was out
Forget
of the band.
school, out of the band,
Yeah.
doing a job.
Yeah.
And so the band kind of fizzled out, and then I started to want to play R&B.
Okay.
So with some older boys, two older boys, Nick Straker and myself, formed a band, and the band was called Stonehenge.
That doesn't sound like an R&B sort
Well,
of title.
it was R&B, right? We did some, soul tunes, and we did some hippie stuff as well. And until we had a festival one time at, where was it? In Kensington Town Hall. And we found that there was another group called Stonehenge. So there was Stonehenge 1 and Stonehenge 2. I don't remember which Stonehenge we were, but we did the festival anyway. And then the older members of the group wanted to play prog rock.
Of your group? Or Stonehenge?
Of Stonehenge, right? The two older boys wanted to play Afro rock, prog rock and all that, right? And the two younger lads, Nick Straker and myself, we wanted to play reggae.
Ah.
So there was a slight difference in musical opinion.
Okay.
So they went their way.
Yeah.
And then we formed our reggae band.
Which was called?
Matumbi.
Ah, that's when Matumbi started.
Yep.
From Stonehenge.
Stonehenge was first.
From prog rock into reggae.
All that.
Right.
Well, in Stonehenge we played quite a lot of B.B. King. I was like, da 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 da, chick, da 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 da. You could play that for about 6 hours, right? And people would just be shaking their hair and getting a few joints on them. A couple of pints of Nuki Brown.
Yeah, it was the era for that.
Mate. We did the daring thing we dared to become a reggae band. I mean, all the other bands, Equals and all those bands, were playing, pop, bit of funk. And we thought, no, we want to be a reggae band. We wanted to be like Toots and the Maytals.
Yeah.
We wanted to be like the Pioneers.
Yeah.
Dandy Livingston. Susan, beware of the devil. Don't let it make you.
Yeah.
Because that beat, right, the reggae beat, was infectious from the first time we kind of got into it. Because before we'd ignored it because it was the music of our parents.
Okay.
And we didn't want to be playing the stuff that our parents were listening to. But then we found out that was the only way you could go to a party and dance with someone else, like really close up. And it was nice. It still is. Right? And we were basically discovering our manhood, right, dare I say.
Okay.
And we wanted to, interact with the opposite sex. And reggae provided the right kind of beat to do that. We were rehearsing with a guy called US Flat Top. And Flat Top had us rehearsing all these Pat Kelly songs. And Pat Kelly was very famous in the charts. He was one of the first reggae singers to go in the charts, right, and be played on Radio 1 and that. And he had this song out called How Long? And the bass line goes, dum, do, 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 dum, do, 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 dum, dum, do, 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 dum, do, 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 do. And then he would go, in the long way. He had this really high voice, you know, and he wouldn't move on the stage, just stand and go, making the trains live alone. And it was a phenomenon, right? So Flat Top was his agent, and he'd booked Pat Kelly in Manchester and in Margate on the same night.
Oh, gosh.
And Pat Kelly was famous for a big afro. And Flat Top armed himself with an afro wig. And he was going to do one of the gigs, and Pat Kelly was going to do the other. But there was confusion about who was going to do what gig where. So we went to Margate. It was in Dreamland Ballroom. I thought, that's Nero. You know, if they start throwing bottles, we can get home quickly. You lot go. So Pat Kelly was going to go to Manchester gig. And then we pull into the Margate gig, and Pat Kelly's there with the band.
Oh, shoot.
He's going, expletive, expletive, expletive. You know, words with "clot" at the end. And he said, look, Matumbi, it's nothing about you, but that clot, I don't want to work with his clot anymore, to clot. So, you know, there was plenty of clot being brandished about. And then he said, well, I quite like you guys and I want to work with you. So from there on in, he started booking us to be his backing band because we'd learned his repertoire anyway. And he was amazed that kids our age could play, you know, what he was playing, what he was singing. And so we became Pat Kelly's backing band.
Ah, I see. So you weren't supporting him on the tour. You were playing
we
with
were his band.
Ah,
and then
wicked.
We were the band for Ken Booth.
Wow.
Who came over and we did a tour with Ken Booth. Then Johnny Clark.
Oh my.
And then
gosh.
Iroy, which was like the phenomenon. Iroy is the guy who talked on the end of Point of View. And he was like the first toaster. Now they're called rappers or MCs. But if you get a man with a microphone talking and going, "Wah baby, ba-ba-doo, ba-doo, 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 ba-ba-boo," and like that, right? We used to call that a toaster.
Toasting, yeah.
Right? And so he was the first toaster to come over to this country and perform with a live band because they all came and did them on the sound systems, you know, and just played the flip side of the record. But here we were going, right, we're going to put together a band, a show. And because before that, when we were working with Johnny Clark, Robbie Shakespeare had been in London, and he was amazed with the fact that we were brave enough to get up on the stage and throw, you know, music around like that. And because he'd only ever played in the studio, and he said, right, I'm going to put a band together now. So he did with Sly Dunbar.
Okay. So you were his inspiration.
Yes, so he says.
That's amazing to hear all of that, Dennis.
Mate,
yeah. Really great.
when you get to my age, stuff happens.
Well, there's also your
determination.
And your determination, exactly.
Never gonna give up.
So, story goes that you played with the Wailers as well.
We did support the Wailers. In fact, in 1972, we had a deal with a record deal with Trojan Records. And Trojan was the record company that, if you wanted to put a reggae tune out, you had to be on Trojan because that was the only label people were looking to for reggae. And so we went there and we recorded a song called Go Back Home. And it was about Enoch Powell's speech that he made, The Rivers of Blood. And when we played it, they went, well, we're not putting that out. but we had also done a version of Hot Chocolate's Brother Louie. So I couldn't see why they didn't want to put the other one out because it was too political. But Brother Louie was more political than they ever even imagined. So they liked that because it was a cover version, and they put that out. And then we had our first record out. And then
Trojan, and that's Matumbi.
Yeah, and then we did a cheeky version of one of our favourite bands, Kool and the Gang, had a song out called Funky Stuff. And it went, can't get enough of that funky stuff. And we went, can't get enough of that reggae stuff. We made a different version. And so when that record was about to be released, we heard that Bob Marley and the Wailers were coming over and that they were going to do a show at the Sundown in Edmonton, which is now a Lidl. As they do. All our best cinemas, eh?
Yeah.
Lidl. And it was going to be the Ethiopia Famine Relief. That was the first Ethiopia Famine Relief concert.
Oh, right.
1972. Sundown in Edmonton. And we were selected to open the show by Trojan.
Brilliant.
Because Trojan were putting out Wailers records, they were putting out our records, and we were honoured that they wanted us to be on the show. So we went into the rehearsal room for about 6 months, practiced what we were going to play, made sure that we couldn't make any mistakes, and brought with us to the gig, more importantly, a sound engineer. Yeah. No one was using sound engineers in them times. It was like, get up and play. You know, but we thought, no, we have to have someone down there who's controlling it, hearing it from the audience and making it sound, you know, good everywhere.
Yeah.
So we got this little kid. His name was Willie Williams. And he had a PA system. And he worked for a group called Griffin. And another group called The Band. N-E-D. Not Bob Dylan.
No, not
the
Bob
Dylan. The P-A-N-N-E-D.
Yeah.
The Band. I mean, there was a play on Bob Dylan's The Band, right? And he had this PA system, but he didn't know how it worked. And I'd been privileged to have been the sound engineer in my school, in the school studio. So I had an idea about, you know, knob twiddling. Don't get me wrong. And, come on. Sounds funny, that knob twiddling, eh? But that's what engineers do, twiddle knobs. So I've got a friend called Nobby Turner. Anyway, so we went and we were trembling as we kind of like, we're going to play before the Wailers.
Yeah,
Man, this has got to sound good. Anyway, we made it through and the crowd were magnificent and we played our new release and my mate Nick, who's a little ginger-haired kid, right? Can you imagine a little ginger-haired kid playing the organ in a reggae band, right? Only the most important instrument at that time. So we put him up on the horizon. He's going, no, take me down, take me down. He's going, no. The lights will look, your hair will look good in the lights. Right.
Mean.
So we got him up there. And when we played Liquidator, tunes like that, you know, the audience went mad. When we played our tune, there was a big organ solo in the tune. And when he took it, the crowd went mad. Because they hadn't seen many little white kids playing in a reggae band, you know. And then someone wrote in the press that Matumbi were better than the Wailers. Our drummer, who was a friend of Bob, wanted to beat that guy up. Said, even if you thought it, you shouldn't have written it, right? You know, because how can you say that we're better than the people that we're idolizing? You know, but we did have a good gig because they came on and there was lots of equipment problems. Right. Lots of feedback, stuff breaking down and stopping and starting the tunes, you know, in between, you know, and all that.
Right.
And and so they got a bad write-up, really. And then from there, Matumbi was like revered, kind of like the band you should see.
How did you make the leap then from, you're sort of getting there because you're talking about how you started to twiddle the knobs at that
Nobby
gig.
Turner.
Is that how you sort of started to get into production at that stage?
Yes, because I have had many arguments with sound engineers because they wouldn't turn the bass up. And I go, mate, we're making reggae. The bass has got to be loud. You know what I mean? Boom, boom, boom. Your neighbour's got to phone up and complain. It's got to go through the wall. I mean, imagine reggae with no bass. Hello. So, and they go, oh, the needles are going in the red. I'm going, mate, that's what we want it. Leave it there, in the red. No, but it's distorted. To go, can't hear nothing.
So who were you having those conversations with? Like Trojan?
No, sound engineers in recording studios in London, when we go in to record, and they go, oh, no, you're going to blow the speakers. Don't turn that down a bit. And I go, I know a thing or two about this. Stand back. That's what we want to hear. And so people like Linton Kwesi Johnson and that knew that I'd been, the one to stand up to these engineers and actually get the sound that reggae kind of demanded to have to be reggae.
Yeah.
So I got a job as a sound engineer in a studio in the West End.
Which studio?
Gooseberry it was called, in Gerrard Street in Chinatown. And within a year, I was recording up to about 80% of the reggae in London.
Ah, incredible.
Yeah. Because I dared to turn up the bass.
Just quickly back to sort of dealing with Trojan. Did you sort of learn much about the business, the record industry from working with them?
Well, I learned that record companies are not honest. I learned that they will put your record out and don't tell you. I learned that they will tell you that they've paid £100,000 for the studio when they got it for nothing, and then recoup it from your royalties.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
So you didn't learn, you learned what a lot of people already know, really.
That record companies are best left alone. So we went and got off Trojan and started recording our own stuff in the studio and making our own record label and releasing our own stuff.
Did you have a name for the record label, or was it just a white label?
Well, no, the label was called Matumbi Incorporated.
Yeah.
Music Corporation.
Yeah. And how did you distribute those records at that time?
Well, there was a guy called Buster Pearson. He was the father of the group called Five Star.
Yeah.
And he had a Hillman Hunter. And we'd get in the back of that car, pack records in it, and drive from Luton to Leeds.
Dropping the records off.
Dropping records off. On a Saturday morning, we'd leave about 6 o'clock, and by about 11 o'clock, we'd be in Chapeltown at night with cash.
Though you were making your own records, but I think you sign to Harvest as well?
That's right.
EMI's progressive wing.
Well, that was the label they put us on.
Who's they?
The record company. Because what happened was Trojan were threatening us that if we didn't come back to Trojan, they were going to sue us because they had a contract where 7 of us got 3% of 90% of the wholesale selling price. Any mathematicians in the house?
Wow.
And there was 7 of us to share that 3%.
Wow.
We weren't making money for ourselves. So we went off and formed our own record label, and they went, we've got a contract on you.
Okay.
And I said, if you're not careful, I'll put a contract out on you lot. I know geezers from down Bow. You know what I mean? Mile End. I got mates in Mile End. I said...
Did you really say that?
I had to say something. Get them off my back. And then we got a call from EMI saying, would you like to sign with us? I went, yes! And Trojan came back again. Matumbi went, you better speak to EMI. Okay. And they left us alone.
Yeah, okay. Was it a better experience?
No.
No. I didn't really think it
was worse. Because just recently, I went to a place called San Luis in Brazil. the north part of Brazil by, the Amazon there. And one tune of mine called Ordinary Man, when I started to play that tune, the people were like, what? I was like, you know this tune? I was like, that was a big hit here in 1979.
Wow.
EMI didn't tell us that.
Wow.
It was not reflected in our statements
Yeah.
or our remuneration.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they're busted and, the state that they're in at the moment.
You did a bit of sound system culture. You had your own sound system, did you?
Yes.
Sufferers
Hi-Fi. Well, when
How
I
did you
left
get into
school,
that? Yeah.
I used to make dub plates at school in the school studio, just in, lunchtime. A few dub plates to sell to sound systems, get some beer money, as 17-year-olds do. And
And how did you make them? What, you made them into vinyl?
yes, in
At
fact, there was a studio in Wimbledon called R.G. Jones. And we used to go down there on a Saturday morning, and the old man would cut some acetates of the stuff that was recorded in the school studio. Then on a Saturday night, I'd go out to the parties like Coxon, Tool Creed, Jim Daddy, and go, put that on. And they put it on and go, do you want it? Yeah, £3. In fact, the
That's
first
so
one we
cool.
sold to Jim
That
Daddy,
is so
£3.
brilliant.
We got a taxi home, drunk, and still had money left.
So the taxi
do
was
it.
like 50p or so. No.
What, 50p? What? No, taxi was
Less.
about 1 and 6.
Oh, was it? All right.
If you could
Your
get
memory,
your head around
you
that.
have not got dementia, I can tell you that.
In fact, 1 and threepence. At that time.
That is just such an amazing story, isn't it? Like
Mate.
making vinyl on the day and then taking it out to
And
the sound
flogging
system.
it in the dance.
Hello.
Yeah.
Now
See, 'cause
look at vinyl.
I also studied typography, and that's the process of setting print. You got to do it all backwards, right to left, so it comes out when they stamp it on the thing, right?
Yeah.
And I used to print the invitations for blues dances from all the sound systems, because my dad knew all the sound system people,
All right.
and they knew that I was doing this print thing, and the invitations to blues dances
Yeah.
used to be on, really pretty cards. And I could get them from the printers down the road and take them to school, and in the lunchtime, set the printing press and run off a couple of hundred quickly, and then, pocket money.
Wow. Industrious.
Wait, well, my dad was a bus driver, so I had to make money somehow.
You got involved with Lovers Rock, producing Lovers Rock. Then obviously you're
Yes.
doing 80% of the reggae in London. I would have thought you were quite instrumental in that.
Well, what happened was that we decided that the girls, the ladies, were just singing backing vocals in the background, and they weren't really any Diana Rosses, There were no lead singers for groups. Girls were always in the back doing backing vocals. And there were a lot of girls who had a lot of things to say and, were kind of feminist, and being the brother to 6 sisters, I had it at home as well. So I was like, all right then, you can take the microphone. And then there was this girl called Marie Pierre. And she was like, the Diana Ross on the block. And I'm going to be a singer.
Yeah.
And I thought it was great. And we wrote some songs together and recorded them. And then because in the dance, we used to go, Lovers Rock, to kind of prips the lads that the next tune, you better find a partner. Right? Because it's going to be a smoochie. Right? And so when Dennis Harris wanted to make a new record label, one of the suggestions was, I think it came from me, Lovers Rock.
Yeah.
And he went, I like that. And he took out a pen, he drew a heart, like the Cupid thing with an arrow through it. And he went, that's it. And after that, people started calling that style of music lovers rock. You know, because I would pitch my work on what was happening in the sound system world, because people were far more interested in listening to sound systems than live music. So I had to kind of either bridge the gap or conquer it with live music, you know.
Yeah.
So when we came with young ladies singing the lead, you know, and my friend John Kapai wrote a song called In Love with the Dreadlocks. Now, we used to say West Indian girls can bring any kind of guy home to meet their parents, but a guy with dreadlocks.
Right.
You know, it didn't matter what, any kind of guy from any nation, anywhere we accepted, but if he had dreadlocks, it'd be, nah. So here was a young girl going, I'm in love with the dreadlocks, and I've never felt this way before. Can you imagine everyone going, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And then the music started being called Lovers Rock.
Yeah.
So in that groove, I thought I better do something. And had an idea after watching telly, and there was a Memorex ad on TV where the singer who's was singing, and it wasn't Minnie Riperton, it was, I'll tell you in a minute. She was singing, and then the glass broke.
Yeah, I remember that ad actually.
With a very high note, right? And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if I had a song that every time it was sung in the pub, all the glasses went and rattled. You know, you have to hold your pint, right? So I had this idea to make the singer go, silly girl. And then when I, thank you. And then when I found the singer who was going to sing it, a young girl, 19 years old, Janet Kay, and I said, Janet, I got this song, but you got to go, and she looked at me and I said, don't go there. I am all male. And she said, well, you can do that. I must be able to do it. Give me the microphone. And it was off.
Brilliant single. And were you writing it to be a hit?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So you were sort of thinking, right,
that
I
was
going to
pay my mortgage. You know, the thing was that I wanted a song that was like a pop tune. The chorus, verse, you know, had that high note in it. And because I'd worked with her, we'd done a version of Loving You.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that, right? And
I remember that.
You're the singer for my tune.
Yeah.
And in the test of time, it's become quite an anthem for the lovers.
It really has.
Yeah, and I see some little, you know, people singing it, and here comes the high note.
There was a bit of snobbery towards reggae made in the UK.
Yes.
Was there? As opposed to the Jamaican imports.
Yeah.
Was that the thinking behind the 4th Street Orchestra?
Absolutely. People in the sound world would frown upon music that was made in London. And if you made a record in London, it would be pressed and it'd say, made in England, right? I didn't want that on my record, made in England. Also, records pressed in England had a little tiny hole in the middle. I wanted a big fat hole like, you know, like the imports. So I found a machine called a dinking machine. And I thought, oh, this is how they do it, is it? Go, shh, and then, you know, big hole in the middle,
right.
No information as to who the artist is, or just a handwritten something that was illegible. And if you like the record, you buy it. It wouldn't be prejudiced by a name that was known in England or that tiny little hole in the middle.
Right, okay.
And then I formed a group and called it the 4th Street Orchestra,
Yeah.
which no one had ever heard of. And they thought, oh, it must be a new group from Jamaica.
Ah.
And we made an album, and it was called Ahu Se Gode. Now, that was a phrase that was popular in the dance. DJs would go, who say? Right, which means who wants to hear this record again? And then people would go, Gode! And go, doom. Play the tune again, or play the B-side, or play another version of it, you know. So I called the album Who Say Gode, right, which was a popular thing in the dance. And then when it came out, I didn't say who it was, and it was 4th Street Orchestra. Nobody had heard of them, and then people just bought the record.
Wicked.
Until a guy on Black Echoes called Snoopy went, I know who that is. I wanted to smack him. Because he ruined my trade. There I was, printing records in Ireland and selling them over here at import prices. And he's going to put a spanner in the spokes. You know, I mean, it's Dennis Bovell and Matubia. They come from Wandsworth. They're making it. I thought, I'll put a fatwa on him.
So it was out.
Yeah, it was out. And then we had to
Secret was out.
put our hands up and go, yeah, it was us. And you're not getting your money back.
So there is a close association between punk and dub.
Of course there is. We're all rebels.
Don Letts said it was because
Don said it was
there were too few punk records to play.
So you had to play reggae in the punk days.
Yeah.
That's all right. The bass was heavy.
Very.
And then
So how did you get involved with punk?
a guy called Dick Odell.
Oh my God.
Dick Odell called me up and he goes, Dennis, I've got this group and we're going to sign to Warner's and I want you to do an album with them. But we'll do a single first. Well, you come to Warner's to a meeting and he turned up in his pajamas.
I think I
So
remember
I thought,
that.
hey, I like this guy. So every time the record company would say something that he didn't agree, he'd go, I thought, that's very original. And the group was called the Pop Group. So we went into a studio in Dorking, Capel, in fact. Capel in Surrey. Right. Little village outside Dorking, Horsham, near there. Right? And it was a residential studio. And it came highly recommended because Roxy had just done their album.
Roxy Music?
Yeah.
Okay.
In that studio.
Who Mark Stewart adored Roxy Music, I think, as well.
Absolutely.
Maybe you shouldn't say that.
So the studio was owned by John Anderson from Yes. The equipment was owned by him. Wow. But Yes were on tour. So you know when the cat's away, you know what happens. So we got the equipment out, set it up in a barn in Capel, and made a recording studio.
Gosh.
And the first album was the Pop Group, Why? And we spent quite a long time making that album. When it came out, I was very proud of it. I'm still very proud of it. The first tune we made was a tune called Beyond Good and Evil.
Yes.
And Mark Stewart was very young at that time. Mark, why don't I put a fuzzbox on your voice? He went, great idea. Only kidding. And then I got a call from Island Records asking me if I was interested in producing what they were calling the first female UK punk band.
Can we just hold? I'm sorry to interrupt your flow.
Okay.
Can you just tell me did you do something special on that Pop Group album that was...
I did loads of things special.
Yeah.
I let Mark Stewart sing.
Yeah.
That was special enough. I tolerated him for 10 weeks. That's even more special.
He's an amazing
No, he's my mate
singer.
anyway, Mark. I was just out in Italy with the Pop Group. Big show. Well, what happened was that they knew that I was a feedback maniac because Jimi Hendrix was one of my favorite guitar players. And I always marveled at the way how he managed to fuse feedback into his music and how the feedback was kind of musical. And I jumped at the chance to be able to do that. So one night, Gareth Seeger.
The guitarist?
Yeah.
Or one of the guitarists,
Yeah, I made him record about 15 hours of feedback. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Recording feedback." And then we sat for a day choosing the tastiest bits of the feedback. You go, "Oh, that's a tasty bit." Oh, that fit right in there. And then...
On tape, all on tape.
All on tape, and then playing it back
Rewind forward,
back into the multi-track. And then Gareth had to learn how to do that for stage. He did.
Yeah.
So...
That's one of your things that you did.
That was the off in the punk world.
Okay. So then you were going to tell us, I think, about Ireland ringing you up about...
The Slits.
The Slits.
Yeah, I met these younger... In fact, Don Letts, I think, had a hand in, getting
Introducing you?
Yes.
Okay.
And so him and Dennis Morris. And I'd just finished working with Linton Kwesi Johnson on his first album... Poet and the Roots, Dread Beaten Blood.
Yeah. Were you producing that?
Yes. I was
producing
and playing and the sound engineer.
And arranging?
Chief cook.
Yeah.
And bottle washer.
And touring it live?
Not yet.
We get to that in a minute.
We toured it many years later.
Yeah.
But at that point, Blackwell was interested in the equipment that I'd used to do that.
Oh.
And he came down to the studio to have a look and said, "Do you think you could do some funk in here?" And I was like, "Yeah, let me at 'em." And then he sent me all these recordings by the Slits. And I spent quite a while sifting through what we would do to what. And then we went into the same studio that I'd just come out of with the pop group.
In
Capel, in Surrey, yeah.
Yeah, I read that I think you describe it a bit like a massive jigsaw of pieces that you had to sort of try and put together. The amount of material that you had just before you... It was the album, The Cut? Cut,
that was their first album.
Yeah.
Well, I thought that they had lots of, as I said, little pieces that needed to be welded together. And I had my suggestions, of how we would come out at the other side.
Yeah.
And thankfully we did, and I played that album the other day and it still sounds crisp.
It really does.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it.
Actually, I spoke to Tessa sort of on email just before coming, and she would have really, Tessa the bassist, and she would have really liked to have come. But she said, I asked her just to say, anything.
Don't tell us what she said.
Huh?
She said, not in.
She said a few things that I won't maybe say, but she did say that the fact that you believed and trusted in our creative integrity was very refreshing and helpful, as we were generally under attack consistently from the press and society itself at the time. And who else would have put up with us, she says.
Wow.
Viv Albertine said something very similar. She says, Dennis coralled us into shape and tidied up all the ends, but without trampling on the creativity. It was so rare for a man in those times to put himself inside the heads and hearts of 4 crazy young women. So there you go.
I do remember one time. Thank you. One time in the studio, we were trying to get an acoustic guitar part. I took the guitar away from Viv, and I played something magnificent. And she started crying. I'm like, what are you crying for? She says, no one's ever going to believe that I played that. I thought, you're right. Rub it off. And then she thought I was going to be the producer and go, no, I played that. You better learn to play that because this is what fits with the tune. But no, I had to respect the fact that they were the ones who were going to have to go out in front of audiences and play what was on that record. And if they couldn't, the audiences would boo them because they would say it was a fake record and they didn't play.
Yeah.
And I had to be very mindful that everything on there except one or two things, was something that they played.
Yeah.
So when I got my chance to play something on the record, I armed myself with a spoon, ashtray, and a box of matches.
Box of matches. Yeah, this is Tessa.
All right, and the song was called Freetown.
Newtown.
Newtown. Yeah, thank you. She's listening. And the lyrics said, Newtown, where everybody goes around sniffing television or taking footballina. It was like TV and football were the new drugs, and this in this new town. Right, so I thought I better have something that was, reminiscent of drug taking. So I got a spoon, right, an ashtray, and a box of matches. And I would shake the box of matches and go, and occasionally take one out and go, where it's striking the match, right? And then hit the spoon on the ashtray, ding, 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 and go, he's mad. And I said, well, the spoon is heroin, the ashtray is fags, the box of matches as well. And I was trying to explain about all this. And then they went,
very young girls. In the
absolutely.
No, but it sounds great, Newtown. I mean, listen, you don't know that's what the percussion bits are, but it's just got that depth.
Well, now that I've told you, go
texture.
and listen to it.
Yeah. There was a story, though, about Ari Up, the singer.
Ari. There are many stories about Ari.
Similar sort of heights that she could reach with her voice, like Janet.
Like Janet, absolutely.
Tessa said that something happened, don't know if you when she was singing Shoplifting.
Oh.
I mean, maybe we shouldn't.
Well, if you listen to the record, you will hear what happened.
Oh, really?
Because at the end of the record, she had to do a scream. And at the end of one scream, she goes, I pissed in my knickers.
It's such a high note.
Right. She wet herself. And I thought, that'll do good as a sample. Leave it on the record. Folks, what you hear is what happened.
Okay, so, yeah, on that, how do you get your best performance or the best performance out of someone in a studio? You've worked with some great
including
singers.
Yourself.
That's very kind of you.
So make them do
Joss
it again.
Stone, you've worked
yeah.
with Ari Up, Janet Kay.
Yep.
You seem to have a great
an understanding of the female voice.
Wonderful.
Well, if you had a mum like mine that screamed at you every time it did something wrong, you'd understand females. Go, don't do that! No, with Joss, it was...
What did you do with Joss?
Well, I wrote about 3 songs for her album, something Water.
Yeah.
Was it?
Actually,
Water for Your Soul.
That's it.
And a lot of the reggae people were up in arms when it won best-selling reggae album for the year in 2015 in the US.
Crikey.
People were like,
That's
hey,
great.
She's not reggae, Anna. And I goes, no, but I am, and I produced the record, so buzz off. And, no, Joss, with a voice like that, I thought, great singer. She wanted to sing reggae. She wanted to know what dub was. She wanted to, get into it. So I thought, okay, let's do it. And Richie Stephens, my friend Richie Stephens, drummer, son of the great John Stephens, and drummer to Boy George, and hanging out with George Clinton and all that kid. Yeah. He called me up and said, Joss wants to see you. I thought, all right then, what does she want? She wants to write with you. And the first thing she said, I want to write a song about marijuana. I said, Joss, I've stayed away from that subject for many years. She goes, well, now's the time for you to... So I said, all right, here's a line. Of all the flowers in the field, you're the finest. And we took it from there and wrote a song called Sensimila, and it's on her Water for Your Soul album. And she wanted to know what dub was, so I mixed some dubs. Okay. And then she wanted to do a concert at the Roundhouse. and invite me to come and sing with her. And I got Linton Kwesi Johnson to do his poetry on her album, because she was a big
Brilliant.
Linton fan, yeah.
Brilliant.
And Linton said, tell her I'm a fan of hers and all. Yeah.
So, let's talk about Linton and you. Live. So you produced that album.
Got
The
the
one
Just
that you,
album or the Linton album?
The Linton album. We're
I've-
jumping now. Yeah.
I have to say, Linton's never been in a recording studio without me.
Okay.
In his whole career, in the last 35 years. Every time the phone rings out, Dennis, what? Studio. Yeah, new album. All right.
And off you go.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've done a lot of work with Linton then.
Yes, we've toured the world, in fact,
Yeah.
with Linton in the last 35 years. I don't look that old, do I?
I saw you
Get
play actually with him in, I remember in the south of France sometime, outdoors, and you were supporting Fela Kuti.
Yes. Well, Fela Kuti had come over to London to put Juju on EMI because they owed him enough money. And he brought his magic man to make them pay up. And then he said, and I want to record in Dennis Bovell's studio. I was like, okay. And we went over to Amsterdam to record Fela Kuti, Movement of the People. And there was some lighting problems. We were in a place called the Paradiso, opposite the Bulldog. You know it? Yeah, I bet you do. And in Lights Up Lane. And we recorded the album and came back to London to mix it.
Yeah.
And there was a on the bass channel. We couldn't get it off because the lights had been, the phase of the lights.
Interfering.
So he was furious and ready to do someone. And I said, stay thy hand, brother. I'll replace that bass line for thee.
And you did.
And he said, do you play bass? I went, occasionally. I've done it before. And I plugged the bass in and I replayed the whole bass line from top to bottom.
Wicked.
And he was
Amazing.
I wish I hadn't done it because after that he wouldn't leave me alone. After that he was like, where's Dennis? You got to come. And it was like, I had to be everywhere, whatever time it was at. And I didn't want, they did do one thing that I'm grateful for now, is that they put bass, Dennis Bovell, on the album. Live sound engineer, Dennis Bovell. People going, how did you do that? Did you play that from the console while the gig was going on? I'm like, well, I could have, but I didn't. Went back in the studio, because what had happened was once we'd finished the recording, the band had gone back to Nigeria, and it was just Fela and me doing the mixing.
Yeah.
So to save the day.
You did that bass
Yeah.
line. What a great, another great story, Dennis.
Mate, I'm full of them. Thank you.
Did you connect over the politics with Linton?
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, I had been the victim of unscrupulous police officers who saw fit to perjure themselves and accuse me of a crime that I had not committed. What had happened was I was playing my sound system in a club in Cricklewood, and the police came in there and they arrested someone. And while they were taking that person out, people in the club decided to free the prisoner. They then went and said it was because the DJ took the microphone, went on the stage and said, "Get the boys in blue." Now I'm speaking to a load of black people. Do you think I'm going to be speaking "Get the boys in blue"? They didn't even know who Boys in Blue was. That was that was attributed to me by the chief inspector, who thought that was an inflammatory enough remark. Get the boys in blue. I said, mate, I'd have said something stronger than that. Anyway, they persisted to take me to court, to the Old Bailey, where after 6 months of trial, I had a hung jury. There were 12 people charged. 9 of the 12 charged were acquitted. just to show you what a farce it was. I'm not saying that people didn't fight the police, but the police came back and the people came out worse, because the police came back and kicked the heads in of everybody who came through that door, I'm telling you. And all the ones that weren't too badly bruised got charged with something. But the ones who had their eye gouged out or was bitten by a police dog or something, they were just shoved aside. At the end of that trial, I thought that in English law, a man is innocent until he's been proved guilty. I was not proved guilty because the jury couldn't find a verdict on me, so my innocence should have been presumed. It wasn't. They moved the goalposts, tried us again for the same crime.
I didn't think they were allowed to do that, were they?
Neither did I, but mate, I'm living proof that they did it, okay? Charged me again, then I had another trial at the Old Bailey, 9 months altogether. At the end of that trial, 10 of the members of the jury, after 2 days deliberation, they probably wanted to go home. They said, he's guilty, we're going home. 2 people, thankfully, still stuck to their guns, so which gave me grounds for appeal, because juries are supposed to be unanimous.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
But then the judge said, well, I'll take a majority verdict. And looked at me and went, you will go to prison for 3 years.
Gosh.
For having said, get the boys in blue. That was all they didn't say that I hit anyone. They said, I took a microphone and said, get the boys in blue.
Wow.
And then everyone got the boys in blue. And then I was sentenced to 3 years. So I appealed,
crazy.
And they wouldn't give me bail. So I went to jail for 6 months in Wormwood Scrubs until my case was heard at the Central Criminal Courts in the Strand. In 3 days...
Your appeal case?
My appeal, yeah.
Right.
In 3 days of hearing my appeal, my sentence was quashed, my conviction was quashed. I was given a bit of an apology, pardon, but no money. Here they come now. I never done it. And I was released. And I went on News at 10 and said what I had to say about crooked old Bill.
Good.
And that was it.
Good to hear. Okay, so it did make you quite political, though, is what you're saying.
Well, Lyndon Grady Johnson wrote about several incidents like that where the police had been less than fair.
The sus law.
Absolutely. And so when he came to me to say, will you help me make music for my poetry, it was a resounding yes.
Yeah.
Because I could identify with, what he was talking about. So we made many records.
Yeah. And you're still making
We're still doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
Last year we were in Brazil, in São Paulo.
Amazing. Touring the records.
Well, they don't want to hear in the UK what he's got to say about the British police, so they don't book us over here, But the Germans want to hear it. I mean, I remember in Stuttgart one time, some guy said, Linton, he went, what? He went, England is a bitch. And he went, I know, what about Germany? And there was hush. Yeah, you need a bit of water in after all them stories, don't you? You need,